Hi, someone asked me a interesting question, which is why is it that the world to come, afterlife, life after death, heaven, whatever you want to call it, is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses? It is mentioned in the Talmud, it is mentioned in the Mishnah, it is mentioned in the prophets and the writings, but in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, there's only very oblique references and hints to the idea of an afterlife. There's a reference to a punishment which is known as the soul being cut off from its people, which appears not to be death, but appears to be something that happens to the soul after death. There are references to the death of righteous people as lying down with their ancestors, joining with their people, which, independent of the verb for dying, which is lamut, to die, or and be buried, which is kavar, to bury. In addition, it says shachavim avotav, he lay down with his ancestors, etc. So it appears that there is this idea in the Torah, and certainly Jewish oral tradition and Jewish tradition and the prophets and the writings and the Talmud all talk about this extensively. But why in the 5 books of Moses is this not mentioned? So it's a great question. Actually, it was asked by many of our great sages in the past. There is a commentary called the Abarbanel, Don Isaac Abarbanel, who lived in the 15th century in Spain, followed by Portugal, followed by Sicily, etc. And he has 7 answers to this question, a summary of different rabbis. So I want to give you 1 or 2 of them, or maybe 3. Number 1, Maimonides. Maimonides says that the Torah represents the ideal. And the ideal is to do that which is right because it is right. Avoid evil because it's evil. Do good because it's true. Avoid evil because it's falsehood. And he says not to do good because, what am I going to get after I die? Or avoid evil because I don't want to burn, etc. Those are not ideal motivations. Ideally, we should be altruistic and we should be focused on doing good because it is good. Don't do evil, it's evil. Not always to be making a calculation of the cookie points that we're going to get after 120 years when we pass away. So he says it's to encourage altruism. Later generations understood, the rabbis understood, that not everyone can be altruistic from the get-go. So we need to talk about incentives, and hence they talk more about the world to come. But the Torah represents the ideal, and the ideal is to do that which is good, merely because it is good, not because of my calculations of the world to come. And there are those who add that when a person is focused only on the world to come and not on this world, sometimes you can end up doing horrific atrocities in this world because your only focus is on the world to come and you're ignoring what happens here. That is answer number 1, based on Maimonides. The Ibn Ezra understands, who is a great sage originally from Spain, then France, Germany, and England, medieval sage. The Ibn Ezra has an interesting take on it. He says that really only 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 people will understand the idea of a completely spiritual reward. Life after death is not physical, it is spiritual. He says, but we have a hard time relating to something purely spiritual because we operate in the physical world and our senses are physical and so on and so forth. She says, so the Torah would have to use some type of metaphor, a parable, for that which is the world to come, and the parable would have to be something from the physical world. Problem is, what would people do? Would people elevate themselves beyond the parable, beyond the metaphor, and understand it as completely spiritual, or would they drag down the world to come to their own level? Would we look at it and say, obviously that's a metaphor for something spiritual, or would we say, oh cool, I'm looking forward to 72 caterers, it's the Jewish version, in the world to come? What would we do? So the Ibn Ezra says he thinks that what most people would do would be drag it down to their own level rather than elevate themselves up to that spiritual level. So the Torah would prefer not to even talk about it rather than have it dragged down to our level. And this has happened in other religions and other systems of thought where perhaps the originators talked about things as being, and they meant things to be spiritual, and they just use a physical example, metaphor, parable to describe it. But what happened is that the followers latched onto the physical component, and that's how they looked at it. So the Ibn Ezra says, you know what, sometimes it's better not to say anything than to say something which will be misconstrued. And hence the Torah is silent about the world to come for that reason. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, author of the famous book called the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has a bit of a different point. He says it is easy to make predictions about the world to come because there is no one who's going to contradict you. No one comes back and says, I had a great time even though I did X, Y, or Z. So he says, therefore, it's a safe prediction. Safe predictions are not so significant. The Torah's predictions are risky predictions because the Torah's predictions are all take place in this world, exile and redemption and worldwide dispersion and anti-Semitism and preservation of the Torah. All those various predictions the Torah makes are all predictions that take place here in this world, which means we can verify them or falsify them. And he says that means they're risky predictions, but if they're risky, that means they're significant. To start a religion and to say, look, if you don't follow my religion, this will happen to you after you die, or if you do, this will happen to you after you die, is easy. Anyone can make a prediction like that because I have no danger of contradiction. And consequently, the Torah is not interested in safe predictions. The Torah is interested in risky but significant predictions. It is a sign of the truth of Torah that it gives those type of predictions. So anyway, those are three ideas behind why the Torah does not speak about the world to come explicitly. It only appears in later sources, and each one interesting moral lesson, I think, for us to understand something about the Torah, something about motivations in life, and something about elevating ourselves to the spiritual, not dragging things down to our level. And that's it. So if you have comments, feel free to write it in the comment section under the video. And if you have other questions, feel free to submit them there in the comment section. I will try to answer them in coming weeks.